At my university graduation ceremony, my professor said, "You only made it this far because of luck." My classmates burst into laughter and my parents hung their heads in embarrassment. I walked off the stage in silence, but when the dean made the next announcement, the entire auditorium fell silent. Luck. That's the word my professor chose. Right there on the graduation stage, with my diploma still warm in my hands. He leaned toward the microphone, smiled like he was making a harmless joke and said, "You only made it this far because of luck." My classmates laughed. My parents lowered their heads. I stood frozen beneath the bright auditorium lights at the University of Michigan, and for a second I couldn't even hear my own breathing. I walked off the stage without saying a word, because I knew something nobody else in that room knew. The applause faded behind me while I reached the side curtain. Someone from the faculty whispered, "Don't take it personally." Another handed me the diploma folder without meeting my eyes. I nodded because speaking would have meant crying, and I refused to give anyone that satisfaction. I found an empty hallway behind the auditorium. The vending machines hummed softly. Through the walls I could still hear names being called. Cheers. Cameras clicking. My parents were probably sitting there pretending they hadn't just been humiliated in front of 2,000 people. I closed my eyes. Funny how embarrassment can pull memories out of places you didn't know existed. The first thing I remembered wasn't college. It was a grocery store. I was 16, standing beside my mother in a Walmart outside Ann Arbor. She quietly put cereal back on the shelf because buying my chemistry workbook mattered more than breakfast cereal that week. She smiled and said she wasn't hungry anyway. She lied. Parents become experts at lying about hunger. Dad drove a delivery truck. Mom cleaned offices at night. They never complained, at least not where I could hear them. When I received my university acceptance letter, Mom cried into the kitchen towel she'd been holding. Dad simply looked at the paper for a long time before saying, "We'll figure it out." They always figured it out. I became the first person in our family to attend college. The first semester almost ended me. Everyone else seemed smarter, wealthier, more confident. Some students complained because Starbucks had raised prices. I was calculating whether I could stretch instant coffee through another week. During orientation, Professor Raymond introduced himself as the department's toughest instructor. "If you're here because you think passion matters more than talent," he'd said, "you'll learn otherwise." I thought he was talking generally. Turns out, he was talking to me. The first paper I submitted came back covered in red ink. Average. That single word. No suggestions. No encouragement. Just average. After class I asked how I could improve. He barely looked up. Some people simply aren't researchers. I walked home through cold October rain wondering if he was right. Still, the next morning I went back. Every semester brought another version of the same conversation. You're persistent. You work hard. But effort isn't excellence. Some professors teach by challenging students. Professor Raymond seemed determined to measure how long disappointment could survive inside another human being. Sometimes, late at night, I'd leave the library around midnight and stop at a drive-thru for the cheapest coffee I could find before driving back to my tiny apartment. 3 in the morning became strangely familiar. The glow from late-night television. Microwave noodles. Reading journal articles until the words blurred together. Whenever exhaustion won, I'd open the refrigerator just for cold water and stare at the light inside for a few seconds because somehow that tiny white light made everything feel less lonely. Life outside school kept moving. Friends from high school got married. Bought houses in quiet suburban neighborhoods. Posted smiling Target shopping trips online. Sunday brunches. Baby announcements. Meanwhile, I was surviving on scholarships, campus jobs, and stubbornness. There were moments I almost quit. One winter, Dad injured his shoulder unloading freight. Workers' compensation took months. Lawyers became involved. Bills piled up. Mom whispered one evening, "Maybe you should come home for a semester." Not because she wanted me to. Because she thought she'd failed me. Instead, I picked up another campus job tutoring first-year students. Funny thing. I turned out to be really good at helping people who believed they weren't smart enough. Maybe because I understood exactly how that felt. By senior year I was leading research assistants, mentoring younger students and helping organize community outreach projects with local social services. One project partnered with Child Protective Services to improve educational support for foster children transitioning between schools. Professor Raymond signed the paperwork. He never attended a single meeting. He always found another faculty member to supervise instead. I stopped expecting approval. It became easier that way. Then 6 months before graduation, Dean Morrison called me into her office. I assumed I'd accidentally violated some policy. Instead, she asked me to close the door. She slid a thick folder across her desk. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Community organizations. State education officials. Families. Social workers. Former foster teenagers. One handwritten note simply read, "She treated my daughter like someone worth believing in." I looked up. The dean smiled. "Do you know why you're here?" I shook my head. "The Board of Regents created a new award this year." I laughed nervously. He didn't. "The announcement remains confidential until graduation." I signed several documents promising not to discuss it. Walking out of her office felt unreal. I almost told my parents. Almost. But I wanted them to hear it together. The ceremony returned around me as the memory faded. Someone backstage asked whether I needed medical attention. "No. You look pale." "I'm fine." I wasn't. I could hear Professor Raymond continuing introductions on stage. Another graduate crossed the platform. Applause. The microphone changed hands. "Dean Morrison. Before we conclude today's ceremony." The room quieted. "We have one final recognition." People shifted in their seats. Programs rustled. The Board of Regents unanimously selected this year's inaugural Distinguished Public Impact Medal. Professor Raymond frowned. Dean Morrison continued. "This award recognizes academic excellence, but more importantly, extraordinary service whose measurable impact extends beyond the university." She paused. Over 4 years, the recipient developed educational partnerships now used across 3 counties, secured grants supporting foster youth, volunteered over 3,000 documented service hours, maintained a perfect academic record, and declined multiple opportunities for public recognition because, in her own words, the work matters more than attention. Silence spread across the auditorium. Real silence. My pleasure to recognize Emily Carter. For a second, nobody moved, including me. A faculty marshal gently touched my shoulder. "They're waiting." I walked back onto the stage. This time nobody laughed. Dean Morrison handed me a medal. Then another envelope. She leaned toward the microphone. "One more announcement." Professor Raymond looked confused. "The university is also pleased to announce that Ms. Carter has accepted a fully funded doctoral fellowship jointly sponsored by the National Education Foundation." Applause erupted. Not polite applause. The kind that grows louder instead of fading. I turned toward the audience. My mother was crying openly. Dad stood clapping before anyone else. Then Dean Morrison did something unexpected. She invited Professor Raymond back to the podium. He stepped forward slowly. "The selection committee," she said quietly enough for nearby microphones to capture it, "reviewed every faculty recommendation." His face stiffened. "We noticed yours was the only evaluation advising against Ms. Carter's nomination." He swallowed. "The committee requested supporting evidence." She looked directly at him. "They found none." The auditorium became so still I could hear camera shutters clicking. Dean Morrison wasn't finished. Faculty members are expected to challenge students, never diminish them. Professor Raymond lowered his eyes. For the first time in 4 years. He had nothing to say. Later that evening, after countless photographs and hugs, my parents and I stopped at a little drive-through diner outside town because none of us had eaten all day. Dad stirred his coffee for a long time. "I'm sorry." I looked at him. "For every time I told you life wasn't fair instead of reminding you that you were strong enough anyway." Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We laughed about the old Walmart trips, the broken apartment heater, all the ridiculous ways we'd stretched grocery money. The laughter felt different now. Weeks later I moved into graduate housing. Some nights were still lonely. I still drank too much late-night coffee. Sometimes I wandered Target buying things I didn't really need just because it finally felt good to afford small comforts. Every now and then, around 3 in the morning, I'd stand in front of the refrigerator with its quiet white light filling the kitchen. Only now, when I caught my reflection in that glow, I didn't see the girl someone had dismissed as lucky. I saw the woman who had quietly kept showing up, long after everyone else decided she couldn't. And somehow, that was more than enough. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that quiet strength is never invisible, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories that inspire hope and resilience. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.